Welcome to the cloudonaut podcast. We are your hosts, Andreas and
Michael Wittig. We have been building in AWS since 2009. In this podcast, you can follow along how we build two products for the AWS Marketplace, bucketAV and Marbot. This is episode number 78 and we are recording this on June the 7th in 2023. In case you're watching this live on YouTube or LinkedIn, feel free to ask your questions there in the chat. So, Andreas, let's get started. So, what's your topics that you were working on last week and what you learned last week?
It has been quite some while since our last episode, so I've collected some topics. And the first one is I've been working on Terraform Modules a lot recently for one of our consulting clients. And I've been we're using TerraGrunt and basically to bundle those or to get those modules running together. And the thing I learned about TerraGrunt is, or it's basically, I think that's one of the interesting parts of it, it runs every module individually. So it does not combine everything together, all the Terraform configuration, but it runs every Terraform module one by one and then combines the outputs and the inputs with each other. I was working on that, and then I tried to use the Terraform modules that I was building in the standard way in Terraform. I just was using the module resource in Terraform. I was just importing the module into my Terraform code. And then I encountered something that I haven't thought about yet. And this is, as you're using providers like, for example, the AWS provider, you specify the version of those providers. And when you go to the Terraform documentation and say, give me the code snippet to include the Terraform AWS provider, then it just gives you that snippet and it's with a hard-coded version of the Terraform provider. It's version, for example, version 4.1.0. And the problem is when you do that in multiple modules, and you bring them all together into one Terraform configuration by referencing the modules, then you will run into an issue because when multiple modules use different providers, Terraform cannot, that's basically a conflict when resolving the AWS provider or any other provider because they are defining, in that case, different versions. And that doesn't work. And I didn't notice that. I was running into that issue because I just was using TerraGrunt, and there I don't combine all those modules into one configuration. Each module is individually. But when I used it in another context, I was running into that issue. And I didn't know that you have to be careful about that. And that's why I wanted to share it here. So if you build Terraform modules, you should use a version constraint and say, for example, this Terraform module requires AWS provider larger or equals than 5.0.510, or I don't know which version, doesn't matter. Or you can use another version restriction which says use this major version and then any other minor version that is available is fine as well. So I think that is important to know. I didn't know that. I was expecting in my mental model was that each of the module can use its own providers, but that's not true if you combine them together into one Terraform configuration. So I learned that, and this was interesting to me. Okay. Did you encounter that issue as well, Michael, or did you do it the right way from the beginning? Because you have written a lot of Terraform modules. You have written a lot of Terraform modules. So
yeah, I cannot remember that I was running into this issue, but I think that I don't have the version pinned.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not even sure if I don't know, but I cannot remember that this is an issue. So, but it's good to know.
Especially if you do public Terraform modules that a lot of people are using, then this is very important.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Michael. So the next thing is, I was a little frustrated about the experience with contacting AWS support. And then I was actually complaining on Mastodon and LinkedIn and said, so is there really a difference between AWS support and ChatGPT? Because both get you wrong answers, but ChatGPT is a lot faster and cheaper than AWS support. I was really frustrated because I had a question related to an issue with Elastic Beanstalk, and the answer was really underwhelming and did not even understand at all what Elastic Beanstalk and all that is about. And so I was really frustrated, and that LinkedIn post really went viral and got a lot of feedback on that. And I was thinking, what really strikes me about AWS support is sometimes they really answer your question with a confident answer. They sound really confident, but they don't have any clue. No, so that's really frustrating to me, and I really hate that when that happens. I'm not saying that it happens every time, but it happens much too often. And what I did, Michael, is because I was so frustrated and this topic blew up a little bit, so I created an unofficial AWS support survey, and I just wanted to get feedback from others. What do they experience when contacting AWS support? And I thought, oh, wow, I can use that and show that everyone is not happy with AWS support. But, spoiler, this is not the case. So I got about 50 responses to the unofficial AWS support survey, just a quick Google form. And so interesting first, because this was a discussion as well, is there any quality difference between the different support plans? So there's enterprise, business, and developer. So someone on LinkedIn was arguing that when you use developer support, you can't expect a very good answer. You have to pay for business or enterprise to get someone that is really knowledgeable in that area to answer your question. So I tried that myself. So I posted more or less the same question under the developer plan, under the business plan, and under an enterprise support plan. And what I found in this very small test is the answer was more or less the same in all three cases. 3 different people answered them. At least that's what I can tell from the text and their signature. And but the answer was, the quality was more or less the same and not really understanding my problem. Yeah, from the survey, I learned that 85%, so almost all of the people who answered the survey, use business or enterprise support. So that's maybe important to know, to understand that. And then I ask, how happy are you, or how satisfied are you with the response times? And 50% gave that a 10, which is I'm super happy with the response times. And I think that's probably quite fair. But then the interesting question is about the quality. So are you satisfied with the response quality or with the problem solving quality? And here, this really surprised me, because 71% in summary say I'm satisfied or very, very satisfied with the answers of AWS support. So it doesn't seem like this is an issue for everyone. It's maybe just me, or maybe it's about the questions that I'm asking. I don't know. So I was a little surprised about that. Only 10% say that they are very, very unhappy and unsatisfied with the quality of AWS support responses. So maybe, Michael, it's just me or us, and 10% everyone else is happy. So I was thinking maybe this is about if you are really into a topic and you don't have any basic questions anymore and all the questions really go deep. And actually what you need to do is you should talk to someone from the service team, but you cannot because you cannot easily reach them. And then you try AWS support, but AWS support cannot really help because all they do is checking docs and trying to solve the issue themselves as well. So I think probably in the cases where we need support, AWS support probably cannot really help because we can read the documentation ourselves. We have a deep understanding of the platform in general. But I think when we run into problems, we really need to talk to someone who really understands the issue. That's probably someone working on the product in the service team. So that is maybe what I get from that. So it seems like the vast majority is very happy with AWS support, but it's probably not for me, not for us. So maybe my approach that I definitely not recommend to anyone is to cancel AWS support, stop paying for that. And in case of issues I really cannot solve myself, running into production issues, so we had this SNS thing a few years ago or something like that, I think then the best approach is to contact one of the managers of the service team and try to escalate issues over that. So that's probably what I will do in the future. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, so I think the problem is that if you ask a question that is not, you cannot answer the question by reading the documentation, then AWS support will, I mean, you basically have two options. Either they will kind of just randomly pick an option, or they will admit that they have to figure it out. I think that's what I encountered. So my last encounter with AWS support was that I was asking for what's the maximum amount of data that I can store in an S3 object, because the documentation says sometimes 5 terabytes and sometimes 5 TB. And that's a difference. And the answer from support was just wrong. And what I figured out is that when the AWS S3 pricing page says you pay per gigabyte, and then somewhere in the footnotes they say, okay, that's actually not a gigabyte, but it's a is it a gigabyte, I think. And that's the answer. And then in the FAQ they use gigabyte and terabyte, but without the footnote, and that's just wrong. It is. I mean, from my perspective, this is wrong. FAQ is wrong. So, and the pricing page is somewhat misleading, I would say. And the correct answer was in the documentation, but it is inconsistent. And so I asked them what's actually right, and they just picked the wrong option. So they went for what's on the pricing in the FAQ
I think,
page.
And to really answer that question, you need to ask someone from the service team responsible for that, and they know, but they don't. They have no chance to spread that knowledge within the company, right? So that they're running into issues.
Yeah, so if the docs are missing information or are wrong, then AWS support will tell you wrong answers, which is, I mean, that's kind of fair because I mean they don't have no other sources, but and I think that's probably the people that are very happy with support. If you ask a question that you could also answer yourself by doing research that might take longer, then this is a good option.
Basically, AWS support is guiding you through the AWS documentation. That's more or less their main job. Yeah.
And I think that's okay. I mean, because it takes a lot of time to read it and to understand how it is structured and something like that. Andreas, we have a question in the chat from, let me check that out, from Ubada. And he's asking about AWS certifications. And I think you wrote a piece about reasons why you should not get certified. And I'll paste the link into the chat. So maybe to answer the question is, we both had certification, so the profession, how it's called, architect professional or something, and the DevOps professional, and we don't kind of renew them anymore, so they are expired. But I think if you are early in your career and you don't get access to a job working with AWS without a certification, then it is, I think, a good way to prove that you have certain knowledge about AWS. You could prove that in other ways, for example, by having a little project out on the internet where you do some research or maybe some blog posts or something about a specific AWS service, for example. I mean, if the certification is the door opener for you, then that's definitely worth it. And I think that's kind of the answer. I think there's nothing that should prevent you from doing the certification. And if it helps you to get the job, then it's definitely a good choice.
Yeah. The only thing is that I'm a little skeptical about is that those AWS certification, this is really a race to the bottom, because the number of people with a certification is growing every day. So to distinguish yourself from others, it's probably harder and harder to do that with a certification. Then you need all of them or many of them or something like that. But I think to prove that you have experience with AWS, it still helps, at least when you are early in your career. I agree on that. But I would invest into, instead of just learning to get through the test, invest in really understanding the platform and dive deep into the technical details. I think that's what I really can recommend. It's the hard way, but I think it will pay off at the end.
Yeah, so I hope that answered your question, Ubada. Thanks for sending in your question here. So the next topic, Andreas, is actually something that I can contribute here. And this is a topic that is, I mean, we had this for a long time in our backlog. The problem is that we build AMIs using Packer for the bucketAV product. So we ship an AMI basically to AWS Marketplace, and they review it, and then they put it into their marketplace. So we have to create the AMIs, and while we are developing, we sometimes create a couple of AMIs, and then we also copy them to a lot of regions because we test our software in all the available regions. So we have to, like when we create one AMI, we basically create, I think it's 29 regions now, or maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of the number of regions. And I mean, you don't pay for the AMI, but you pay for the snapshot, for the storage that the snapshot uses. So if you just keep all the AMIs around, it adds up. So for example, yesterday I was just removing 1,000 AMIs from one account. So this is, it helps to clean it up from time to time. And so far we used a project called AWS Ami Cleaner. It's a Python-based project. And the problem is that the project is not maintained anymore. And I think that the maintainer of the project, as far as I understand, works for AWS. And in one of the issues, he mentions that AWS launched similar capabilities, and you should just now use the built-in stuff from AWS. But for me, this is actually not really helpful because it doesn't work for images that are created from tools for like Packer, for example. It just works for images created with AWS tooling. And the problem with the AWS Ami Cleaner that kind of triggered some action on our side is that they don't support launch templates. So what the tool does is it looks for AMIs that are in use in your AWS account to kind of exclude them from deletion. And if it finds an autoscaling group with a launch template instead of a launch configuration, then it just blows up. And this kind of made it unusable for us because we have launch templates in use, and also kind of AWS encourages launch templates. I think launch configuration is deprecated as well, so they don't add new features anymore. Okay, so and this finally led to the decision after researching other solutions is that there is actually no solution out there for cleaning up AMIs, which is a little bit strange. So we created our own little project to remove AMIs, and it works with tools like Packer. It also works if you create AMIs with different tools, but I don't know. I mean, usually most AMIs are created with Packer, I think. And what the project does is, or maybe one step back. What I try to do is I first try to port the AWS Ami Cleaner Python project to Node.js. That's the language that I'm most familiar with these days. And that is like not Java, which is kind of, I mean, it's not so easy to create a CLI-based application with Java that can run on any device. So I went with Node.js. And then I thought, okay, I mean, there's ChatGPT, right? I can just put in the Python project and it turns it into a Node.js project. And I tried that, and to be honest, the result was so bad. I mean, it was really embarrassing bad. So it was just, I mean, it basically missed all the functionality, and the one that was implemented was kind of wrong. So yeah, this was really disappointing. So I tried it myself. And after 2 days, I was so frustrated because I'm not 100% sure if the Python thing is actually correct in all ways or not, because it was really hard for me to port it because I was not very sure about if it's actually correct or not. So I just went with a completely different approach, and within half a day I created our own thing that more or less has the same functionality. So you can include AMIs based on the name or tags, and you can use wildcard, the asterisk character. So for example, we say, okay, include all the AMIs where the name starts with bucketAV-claimav-asterisk. And then you can exclude AMIs. For example, AMIs that are in use, AMIs that are younger than X days, so for example, younger than 5 days. So you can keep the last 5 days. And you can also keep the newest N AMIs. So for example, always keep the last 5 AMIs or something like this. And that's it. and then it will go, and you can also configure the region. It also supports the wildcard character, so you can say, okay, do this in all the regions, in all the Europe regions, and all the US regions, something like that. And it will just go and do that for you. And there's a confirmation screen with a table where you see all the images, and that's it. So if you're needing a new way to delete AMIs, then check that out.
Yeah.
And yeah, we are running it in our own account, so it's at least it seems to work for us. So it should be safe for you as well. Yeah.
It's actually, I think, when I look into AWS accounts from consulting clients, I often see that there is huge numbers of AMIs and snapshots just laying around and increasing the monthly cost. So it's definitely worth to clean that up to get rid of that storage, use storage. Okay, Michael. So one last topic for today, which is so we are currently working on a new pricing model for Marbot, our monitoring and incident management solution for AWS. We have started this project has quite some history. So we started it at a hackathon, and at the beginning it was just free to use. Then we found out that hundreds of teams are using it, and we decided to build that into a product. And the first iteration was we integrated it with Fast Spring, which is I think not back in the days it was a good way to handle subscription and collect payments, basically. And later we transitioned to the AWS Marketplace, because the AWS Marketplace started to offer software as a service subscriptions. So we thought, as all our customers are AWS customers, it would be great to sell it through the AWS Marketplace, so that Marbot just appears on the monthly AWS bill, which is totally fine and worked very well for us. So this is one way to sell software as a service via the AWS Marketplace. It's called software as a service subscription. And what you do is you define one or multiple dimensions, and then you have to, I think every hour, you have to report the usage for each of your subscriptions to an AWS metering service. So in our case, we charge around $5 per user. So every hour for every of our customers, we go through all of them, count the number of active users, and report that number to the AWS Marketplace. And then AWS Marketplace at the end of the month charges for that. So that's how it works. But as I said, we are currently working on reworking our pricing model for Marbot because we added features and we want to shift a little bit the direction of the product. So we're also working on the pricing model. And what I'm currently working on is to transition to what the AWS Marketplace calls software as a service contracts. So a contract in the AWS Marketplace is very similar to what you know from subscribing to any other software as a service solution out there. So you choose a plan, I don't know, the medium plan. This includes certain features or functionalities, and you pay monthly or yearly for that. So with those software as a service contracts in the marketplace, you can define the contract duration, a month, a year, 2 years, or even 3 years. And then you can have multiple options or tiers, which some call that, with a fixed price per month, for example. So that's what we do for Marbot. We have now a fixed price for Marbot every month with those software as a service contracts. And the cool thing here is that AWS handles all of that, and we don't have to do that in our own software or application. That AWS provides a so-called entitlement service. So the marketplace comes with an entitlement service, and there you can ask. So if you have multiple options or tiers, you could say, for example, this tier includes, I don't know, in our case, 10 users and 5 AWS accounts. And then you can ask the entitlement service, is this user entitled for using 10 AWS or 10 users or 5 AWS accounts? So this is that functionality. And you can also have additional pricing dimensions. That's what we will do for Marbot. So we will have a baseline fee every month you pay for Marbot, and then for every AWS account that Marbot monitors, you will pay an additional fee. That's called an additional pricing dimension. You can handle that as well. And this works in the same way as the software as a service subscription work. Every hour we report the usage to the marketplace, and they will then bill on that. So yeah, I think this was kind of interesting. I didn't know that this exists. It seems like I missed the announcement of this feature, or maybe it has been around for so long time and I just missed it. Yeah, so software as a service contracts in the AWS Marketplace are quite interesting when you are planning to sell software as a service. So yeah, go check that out if that's interesting for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach me. I think I learned quite some things about it, and maybe that's a good thing here in the podcast. So if there are others out there that are selling software through the AWS Marketplace, I'd be very interested in forming a small kind of a user group or a small group where we exchange our learnings and stuff. So that would be very cool. So let me know if you sell in the AWS Marketplace as well.
All right, Andreas. I think that's it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Anything to add?
No, that's all, Michael. Perfect.
All right, then let me close this. I just checked. I think there are no questions left on the table. So yeah, that's it. The show is over. We will be back soon. You can subscribe to our newsletter, the podcast, or the YouTube channel here to make sure that you don't miss upcoming shows. And if you have any feedback, you can send us an email, hello@cloudonaut.io. You can just add a comment here on YouTube or LinkedIn. You can also find us on Mastodon and Twitter. Everything that you need to know is in the description. Yeah, thank you very much, and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.